One more minute. One more minute. Where's my music man? Bring Gucci back. Alright, if you can hear my voice, clap once. If you can hear my voice, clap twice. If you can hear my voice, clap 3 times. Or 6 times. If you can hear my voice, clap 4 times. If you can hear my voice, clap 5 times. If you can hear my voice, clap 6 times. You guys are worse than like high schoolers that I've talked to before. All right, cool. So I want to do that one because I want it to be a conversation, and it's just about me, but more importantly, it's about you guys, right, and connecting with each other. So let me start a little bit and talk about where I came from, right? So I'm from St. Louis, Midwestern girl. Went to Washington University in St. Louis. Didn't, leave for college. And I started off wanting to change the world, right? And to do that, I thought I was going to be in education. So I was an education major, got into classrooms, and quickly realized that some of the best teachers and the best students were limited by the government. Federal regulations, funding, state regulations, laws, etc. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to be a politician. So switched my major, political science, ran for student body president as a sophomore and won, was class president, all that good stuff. Got into some local elections, quickly realized we needed some money, right? It's heavily influenced by business, heavily influenced by donations, foundations, and then I also learned that the system is rigged against Black and brown people, right? Because we don't have those assets and the wealth and the things that we can do to protect our assets from taxes and things like that, right? There's all these loopholes. How am I doing on sound? Can you hear me back? Okay, cool. So I'm like, all right, so I gotta make some money. How am I gonna make money and still be me, right? How am I gonna make money and still help the people that I want to help, which is my friends, people who look like me, my creative friends. And so at this point I was a junior, and one of my best friends, who's now our CTO, Jeff, is an engineer. So all right, we're gonna start a startup, right? So you're in college, and when you start a company, most entrepreneurs are solving problems for themselves, right? So the problem that we were solving in college was meal points. So when you are a sophomore, junior, senior, you run out of meal points pretty quickly because you're cheap, right? So at the end of the semester, you're like, oh snap, where are the freshmen at with the meal plans, right? And at WashU, we had a lot of student groups, lots of funding in our student groups. And because I was in the student government, I knew where all the money was going, right? So what we did was we created an app for people to find events that had free food. Right, so it was great for the student groups, so they got new people. It was great for us because we got to eat, and you didn't waste as much food, right? So that was the idea. Great idea. It could still be $1 billion idea, I think. I'm biased, but it didn't work because we spent so much time arguing amongst ourselves. There's 4 founders. Lots of startups fail, and ours was definitely one of them. We never even launched, and it was like beautiful, but we just couldn't, it was just bickering too much. So, but I loved it. I loved the idea of like creating something, building it, testing it. We did, user testing. Because we were in school, so we were really following the process, right? We built mock-ups, we did testing, right? So after that, I was like, all right, I like this tech thing. I like this failing quickly. I like building things. I like learning from my mistakes. So I joined a startup. It's an ed tech startup that I don't think it exists anymore. It's called Backpack TV. But basically, the premise of that startup was that when you're going home from class and you're in your textbook and you're like, what was that? How do I learn this again? Because I wasn't paying attention in class. You can look in your textbook and look on the website, and it'll say, here are the videos that you can watch to learn that concept if you were, not paying attention. Great idea. It was this white guy who was a millionaire, a multi-millionaire, and he was self-funded. And in St. Louis, St. Louis wasn't really like tech hub, right? So it was cool that I had this experience, and I stayed there all my senior year, and he became a mentor of mine. And so I was like, Joe, what's up? Like, what should I do? It was summer before senior year. What should I do? How should I be in the tech world? How can I start a business? How can I get into this life? I'm from St. Louis, I know I need to leave. Where do I need to go, right? And we could talk about cities and communities and stuff too, because I'm in Boston, so we could definitely talk about that. He was like, you should go to Singapore, because Singapore is popping, right? Like, so if you look at tech hubs of the world, Singapore, China, that's the fastest growing tech industry, right? And I was like, whoa, Joe. Singapore, like, I'm from St. Louis, that's not gonna happen, but I'll go to California. I'll go to Palo Alto, I'll go to Mountain View. My brother was already out there, and so that was my leap of faith. So I started looking at companies that, or I started looking at products that I loved. One of them was Mint, and I was like, who owns Mint? Intuit owns Mint. So I applied, totally like cold emails, right? Like, none of these companies recruited at Washington University. So I applied, got the interview, flew out to San Francisco. It's like, yeah, I'm in the tech company, got the offer. So that's how I made my transition into technology. That's how I got to the Bay Area. But while I was there, so I moved, fast forward, senior year. Now I'm in Mountain View, California. And if you know anything about Mountain View, California, it's all Asian and white, right? And I'm from St. Louis. So, and I never left St. Louis, right? And I traveled and stuff, but like not home. So I was like, uh-oh, what is this? Like, where are my people? I didn't have any friends. And it was the first time I felt lonely. I didn't know what lonely felt like. And it was really sad. I moved to DC on an assignment just so that I could be around faces that were familiar to me. And after my assignment in DC, I moved back to San Francisco. And I worked at a startup that Intuit had bought previously. You guys still with me? You found the story? Okay, cool. So I know I'm weaving through the country now. So I'm back in San Francisco. There's more black people in San Francisco because you're close to Oakland, so I'm like feeling okay. But I'm at this startup. So it's a startup that Intuit had bought. They brought me on because I was at strategy and BD at that point, and so I was helping the company transition into Intuit. And so here I am, a BD woman, and in this company, BD was pretty high up because it was a sales organization. So there was like hundreds and hundreds of salespeople, and then like me and a few other BD people. So I was sitting on the sales floor, and here I am with my hair and me, and I'm just like very energetic and stuff, and it's like all white salespeople and me. And so they were like, they didn't know what to do with me because I also just kind of came on the scene, right? And they were being integrated into this company, and I represented the company, and they were the startup, right? And so they would do stuff like have beer pong and kegs in the office. It was really what you think of when you think of startups in Silicon Valley. Like, it was literally that. And after work, they'd be like, do you want to go get a beer? And I was like, no, like, I don't drink beer. But, so it was really tough for me, but I was also happy because I was already in the Bay, and I started making some friends. There's a good network in San Francisco. And while I was there, so now we fast forwarded, right? So we're in fall 2014. Does anyone know what happened in fall 2014? It was just his birthday. Keep going. Yes, Mike Brown was killed in the fall of 2014. So I'm from St. Louis. I'm in San Francisco. Mike Brown was killed, and lots of stuff was happening, right? So it was that Saturday. I remember it vividly. It was a Saturday, and I go online. I see it on my Twitter feed, and I see it on Facebook because I see all of my friends from St. Louis are there, and they're going out into Ferguson, and they're starting to be some buzz. And then I see my San Francisco and Bay Area friends, and they just have no idea. They still haven't been connected to it, right? And then I wait a few days, and a lot of the mainstream Black media companies, Essence, The Root, they hadn't covered it yet. So Saturday, they waited until Monday, for whatever reason, to start covering it. And then a week and a half, 2 weeks later, after some of the riots happened and the fires, then mainstream media started covering it, right? I get emotional because it pisses me off. So that's when I quit, because I was like, this is a problem, and we have to fix it. There's information asymmetry. Black people have huge buying power. We're a huge demographic. We're a growing force in America. We influence culture, and I and my team felt like we had the unique capabilities to fix this, right? So a few months prior to that, we had started Blavity. It was not doing well. I prematurely quit. And yeah, which I'm happy to talk about that struggle too, but I just want to give you guys the baseline so we can start asking questions. So I quit my job, no benefits. My parents were like, what? And started Blavity, started working out of my apartment in San Francisco. Did that for, up until 6 months ago. And now we have our first office, which is in LA, and yeah, super excited, thank you. So now instead of living and working in my apartment, I work next door. My office and my apartment are next door units. I'm all about efficiency. So so that's a little bit about who I am, how I got here, why I'm here today. I want to open up the floor because I know a lot of you guys have questions. I also want to encourage you guys to use the hashtag because we can check the hashtag, especially if there's stuff going on. And also it's good. Yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up back there. And yeah, I'd love to hear about what you guys are working on. If you have specific questions about bootstrapping, we just raised our first round of funding on in 500 startups. If you have questions about teams, there's so many things. So I want to go in the direction that's helpful for you. So I'm going to stop and let you guys raise your hands. Go ahead.
So you said when you quit, you had already started Blavity. Can you tell us just about the beginning of when you started Blavity, what kind of
Right. Sure. So the question was, can we talk about the beginning of when Blavity started? So yes, Blavity started as a video newsletter. So I knew that I wanted to help people tell stories. I looked at the trends. I knew that Black people over-indexed in watching television and going to the movies. And I knew that visual storytelling was something that was really accessible to people because literacy isn't always high in certain communities, right? So I started a daily newsletter similar to what you would think of like Upworthy, right? Where they're curating videos and they're uplifting the things that are the best. So we started a video newsletter on MailChimp, mailed about once a week, curated top 10 videos you needed to know. It was everything from memes to series like TED Talks or anything like that. Built the email list from there, and then after we had a critical mass of 3,000, right, 3,000 email subscribers, built the website from scratch, spent a month and a half, me and my CTO Jeff, just grinding out, after work, and built the email newsletter so that the traffic would go to our website instead of going to YouTube. It was really ugly and nobody liked it. It failed miserably. Has anyone been with Blavity since the beginning? Maybe? Anybody know what I'm talking about with the video stuff? Okay. It's OG status. When people know it, I'm like, what? So went to the website. It was super dark. I thought it was kind of cool. Nobody liked it. And then I was like, all right, well, this isn't working. So redesigned the site, made it a little bit lighter, made it a little bit nicer, started doing content marketing to drive traffic to the website. So started writing blog posts to get people to drive traffic to the stories, right? So the blog posts, so we started a Blavity blog. It was called The Bulletin, because we released it once every 2 weeks. And then we started releasing it more frequently. And so the URL was like blog.blavity.com/blog, right? It was like ridiculous. People were typing it in, like people were typing in blog, right? And that is called friction. So when you are creating something that's very difficult and people are doing it anyways, that means you have something really good. And so I saw that friction, so we pivoted, right? So we switched Blavity.com to be the blog, and we made the blog, or was Blavity.com, and then we made Blavity.com to like videos.blavity.com to see if people really cared about the video site, which they didn't. So that was December of 2014 by now. So I quit before we had really started popping off. Like, I was gone in October, December we made the final switch, and then it was like skyrocket, right? So some of you guys, if you're familiar with Blavity, then you probably found out in the spring of 2015, maybe in the summer 2015. So we were, rolling by then. But I still have those emails, and I bring them up every once in a while when we're like, the team is tripping. But I used to send weekly emails like, hey, we made it to 10,000 people this week. We made it to 50,000 people this week. And now we'll get, 50,000 people in a day. And so it was a funny time. Yeah, it was a good time. It was really stressful, but such is life. Okay, thank you. Is it on?
It's super loud. Right. I just wanted to ask how you guys went about getting funding for Blavity, because I'm trying to, start up my own creative collective right now, and that's like one of the hardest parts I'm finding is just getting the funding and the money to get everything started up. So how did you guys go about doing that?
Sure. How about now? There it is. Okay. So I'm going to answer your question in a long-winded way. Blavity was bootstrapped. I used my personal money for a very long time. We just received funding in February of this year. So I think that I don't think that everybody needs to raise venture funding. We raised venture funding because our servers were breaking and we were getting hacked. And it was too expensive to not have engineers on staff. And engineers cost a lot of money, and you can't justify an expensive engineer because they take a long time to make back the money that you're investing in them, right? Because their salaries are $80,000 plus, versus a sales associate. I'm just going to do some math so you guys can hear what I'm talking about. So versus a sales associate might be paid $40,000, but their sales quota might be $400,000, right? So they're making their salary back for the company. An engineer doesn't do that. So that's why a lot of tech companies need to raise funding, because their projects, they're just a little bit longer lead time. So to talk about how I did go about raising money, I'll tell you about a few mistakes I made. So I started to raise money, last spring. And I started in a very traditional way that a lot of black tech companies start, which is by going to black VCs. Because I was like, they get me, they speak my language, they know my Blavity's gonna pop, right? That was a bad idea. That was a bad idea because a few reasons. One, they're carrying a lot of the same weight that I am. They're a black VC, but they don't necessarily work at a black venture fund, right? So they can't only invest in black companies, so their standards are actually going to be really, really high. And so they can't fail because they've also hustled to get to where they are. So I spun my wheels a lot. At the same time, they were super helpful. They wanted to give me advice, and so I had a lot of false positives. Because I was like, oh, well, they're responding to my emails really quickly. We're on the phone. They're answering my questions. So they feel invested, and then that will translate to a check. Wrong. No. Exactly. No, it doesn't. So that was a mistake, and I wasted, I move quickly. And so in my world, I wasted like 6 weeks on that, which is a long time. So then I was like, I'm not ready. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not ready, the company's not ready, they're asking questions I wasn't really sure I could answer in a way that inspired confidence. And so I stopped, totally stopped fundraising, built more and more over the summer. Blavity grew more, made a little bit of money, got to the point where I really was like, I literally cannot grow the business unless I have a check. Okay. So at that point, a friend of mine, Jason Towns, was like, hey Morgan, you should apply for some accelerators. And I was like, no, accelerators are so time consuming, I'm busy. He was like, no, really, you should apply for an accelerator. So there was an accelerator called New Media Ventures, and it was non-traditional. And they were people who aligned with me, and they aligned with our mission, and they aligned with our values. And they weren't name brand. They'd only invested in a few startups that you probably have heard of. But they trusted me, and they understood me, and they understood why what I was doing was important. So I got my first check from New Media Ventures at $50,000 last fall. And then through that, I was able to use that small money to build a little bit more. So I built for about a month and a half, and then I started raising my pre-seed round. And from there, through their connections, and really using their faith in me as the proof point to the rest of the market to say, look, Blavity is successful, we're going to be successful, we're going to make a lot of money, we're going to have a lot of users, get on board now. And it still was not very easy. I mean, you know, people had to pick me up off the floor in the process. It was not easy, but it's done. And I think going through that process, it's really a mental game. I think a lot of entrepreneurship is about your mentality and about staying positive, staying focused, and not letting other people tell you where you should be going, because there is no pathway. Like, there's not going to be another Facebook. There's not going to be another Snapchat, right? There's not going to be another Blavity. There's not going to be another Essence. It's not supposed to be that way, right? Like, you're not supposed to be duplicating other people's businesses, which is one of the things I think that goes against venture funding in a lot of ways, because they're pattern matching. And so, yeah, that was really long-winded, but there you go. Go ahead.
I had a question about your willingness to, like, you don't need to tell me the numbers, but I was just curious, for the venture capitalists to invest, do you have to give up a portion of the company, or would you be willing to give up a portion of a percentage of the company for venture capitalists?
Yeah, again, I'm super open, so I'm going to tell you. So for a venture capitalist to invest, you absolutely have to give up equity, unless you're a nonprofit, and then it's just a grant. Right? Sometimes I'm like, I should be a nonprofit. So, yeah, I think we gave up around, it wound up being around 15% of the company, which is pretty standard in a fundraising round. And $650,000. No. Yeah, we raised our first check, and then we kept going. And so, yeah, I mean, say for example 500 startups. So how many of you are familiar with 500 startups? Okay, how many are familiar with Y Combinator? Okay, yeah, so 500 startups is like, you know, another version of Y Combinator. So like if Y Combinator is Harvard, 500 startups is Stanford, right?